Good evening, everyone. My name is Matthew Allen, and I'm going to be giving you the demonstration this evening. So this evening, we're going to be looking at our health and safety software. Now, this can be used as an individual product or as part of our whole suite. Okay, if you're going to be using it alongside Estimator Express, what you would do is you would select this option. You'd be able to click Estimator Express Import, select the relevant job, bring that in, and then it would then associate the relevant risk assessments and cost sheets. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to start with a new project up at the top. And what we are asked first is what kind of a job is it going to be? So anything from an apartments to basements and bungalows, shop fitting and so on. Now the reason why it asks us this is because what we're going to be able to have are associated risks, risk assessments and cost sheets that go along with these types of builds. Okay, so if I go with an extension, I can click next. It's then going to select the relevant build phases that typically go with an extension. So cleaning, design phase, external works, depending on what you want to go with. But then what you can do is go, well, I'm not dealing with any of the design phase, so I can just untick that and not worry about that too much. Once you click next, we can then give the job a name. So I'm just going to go demonstration, and then we can click finish. And what's then going to happen is it's going to load up into the job. So once we start on this, once it's finished loading, this is typically going to be our home page. Okay, so what we're going to be able to change on the right hand side here is the logo. So to make sure that we don't have any of our logos on your documentation, just come over here, click that browse, and then you can pop in your own image. Okay, but when it comes to the actual job itself, you've got the project name, that's demonstration for this purpose, project reference, that's going to be relevant to you and your business. Then we have the client, the site address, building company, and so on. So what you would do is you would just go through this list. Now, if you're using this as an estimate, as a health and safety service, okay, you may have clients that come back again and again. So what you can have is if you click this little man over on the right hand side, you have me there to begin with, but what you'll be able to do is add in your relevant clients. Okay, so you can say they're their clients, but you can also add in your contractors if you are going to be using this to help out with your contractors, your designers, any additional emergency services, health and safety directors, and so on. Okay, so you can build up a bit of a catalogue of contacts in here as well. But once you've done that, you just click the drop down box and you can select them. The site address is going to pick up from my name, so we can do that as well. Then we'll have the health and safety director, the principal designer, and the principal contractor. Okay, now you'll just be able to select who these are within the business, and we can go down and we'll be able to crack on with that. Lastly, you've then got your HSE. Now, if I click this drop-down box, you can previously see that I've used Plymouth, Edinburgh, and Bristol, because what we have done for you is if I click this icon again on the right-hand side, we've popped them all in there for you as well. Okay, so we've got Glasgow, Inverness, Kent, Leeds, Newcastle, Plymouth, Sheffield, Westminster, and so on. All right, so again, if I were to use Bristol, I could just select Bristol, click OK. That's popped in there for me, which is quite handy. All right, now, if you want to know more about the health and safety director, the principal designer, the principal contractor, who the risk assessor will be and what their responsibilities are, what you can do is you can just come down to these useful links down here. Now, what we've done is we've created the software hand in hand with qualified professionals and the HSE. Okay, so what you can do here is if you want to know about the responsibilities and duties for various roles, including what the client's duties are, you just click this icon there and it takes you directly to the page on the HSE website. So you know the information you're getting is from the horse's mouth. Okay. Similarly with your F10 notification, vibration guidance, hand arm vibration exposure, and so on. Okay, once you're happy with this, essentially setting up all the documentation and all the information that's going to be on your risk assessments and cost sheets, you can then go to your health and safety policy. Now, you don't have to go to the health and safety policy for every job, okay? But what you can do is you can use ours to build upon your own, or you can use ours as your own. It's entirely up to you. Now, rule of thumb is essentially that if you already have your own health and safety policy, just scan through ours, see what we have stated and what you don't, and that way then just take from that and just stick it in your own. okay, because you may have already paid to have a health and safety policy written. All right, but what we've done is we've spoken to the HSE and we've asked them, look, what has to be stated in a health and safety policy, and they've came up with a list of information, and we've just written that all for you, really. So you can use ours or just copy and paste and take away your own. All right, but then this one tells you about Part A, Part B, and Part C, which are broken down to the health and safety policy, responsibilities and duties, and arrangement for health and safety. What you will have is a declaration, so the overall and final responsibility for the health and safety in company name, which you will pick up when you install the software, okay, is that of the board of directors who are advised by the health and safety director's name, again, the person who you've selected at the very beginning, the director responsible for health and safety within the company. Okay, you'll have that signed and dated, and then if you have any changes or amendments over the year, there are options of you being able to review that as well, okay? What you also have here as well are the managing director, the contract manager, site managers, contract detail, contractors, and the employees. So what you can do here is, if you know who the managing director is, just click with the left mouse button, just the once. A box is going to appear. And then what I can do is I can change this to Mr. Smith, which is what it's meant to be. But then you can see his responsibilities there. Then you've got the contracts manager, site manager, and so on. And then you can just add in subordinates or co-workers. So if I know that site manager does have a co-worker, we can pop that in there. We can call this Tim for the time being, and Tim can have 2 subordinates. Okay, and they're going to be his team. All right, so that way then at least you know if you do have a larger company, you have multiple site managers, multiple teams under those site managers as well. Okay, so you can do that also. Once you're outside of the health and safety policy, you then actually go into the documentation that you're going to be needing for your relevant sites. Okay, before I jump into that, does anybody have any questions about setting up the project, changing the logo, anything about the health and safety policy that they'd like to ask? All right, just before we pop on to the pre-construction information, the construction phase plan, and so on. I'll just give you a few moments if you want to type that. Excellent. Okay, so going from there, we've then got the pre-construction information and the construction phase plan. So these two I'm going to isolate before we go into anything else. So you can see I'm going to hop over the risks, the COSHs, and the method statements. And the reason behind this is because you're going to be using the pre-construction information and the construction phase plan pretty much on every job. Maybe not so much the pre-construction information, but definitely the construction phase plan, if not the larger one, but the smaller one as well. Okay, so the HSE have now got a bit of a they've got a target on pretty much most builders now. Okay, they're not doing it on purpose, but unfortunately they're not as government funded as they used to be. So now what they're doing is they're hoping for builders to make a mess, really, and make the odd mistakes so they can catch them out. Now, if you're going on site with the intention to do any work, whether it's domestic or commercial, no matter how small, you need a construction phase plan, you need your risk assessments. Okay, because if they catch you, they have the right to write you a letter to begin with. Okay, and I believe the first letter costs you about £500. So it's not a fun letter to get, if I'm totally honest. But firstly, the pre-construction information. This is more used on commercial sites. Okay, so firstly, you're going to be going through the project description, including the client brief. Any key dates, this could be testing borehole sites, any key delivery dates. Okay, the proposed use of the structure, depending on what you're going to be working on. Existing records of plans, and the client brief as well. Okay, from there, we've then got the client consideration and management requirements. So firstly, planning and managing the project, including the health and safety goals. What we've done here is we've written the declaration for you, and what you'll find throughout the software is that if we've filled in information for you, just give it a read. If you're happy with it, brilliant, use it. Okay, because what we've written is essentially what needs to be said, and you just build upon it. All right, so firstly, as we can see, the work shall be carried out at all times in accordance with the company health and safety policy, current relevant legislation and approved codes of practice and guidance. Additional measures will be put in place to protect the workforce and clients to minimize the spread of COVID-19 during an outbreak. Okay, so nothing too fancy, it's just stating the obvious, really. From there, we've then got communication and liaison between clients and others. This is going to be email addresses if you're happy to communicate by email, mobile numbers, landlines, depending on how you're going to do it. Okay. Site security, is that going to be a man with a dog? Is it going to be a fence, timber, welfare provision. Are you going to be having hot and cold water on site? Is electricity provided, or are you going to be using a generator? Okay. Site hoarding requirements. This could be for cabins. Okay. Or is it going to be going away with you in a van? Site transport arrangements and vehicle movement restrictions. Do you have any problems, or are there going to be any issues with deliveries to your site? Okay. Client permanent work systems, fire precautions, emergency procedures and means of escape. And we've also got, under your management documentation, a sheet to be able to go through that with. Areas designated as confined spaces, that should be given by the principal designer, obviously. Smoking and parking restrictions. And then COVID-19 vulnerable groups. Do you have any asthmatics within the team? Okay. From there, we've then got information about the boundaries and access, and this is a lot of information that you should be able to get from your architect. So restrictions on deliveries, waste collection and storage, you'll be able to see that from the site. Adjacent land usages, existing storage of hazardous materials. Again, if you're going to be working, say, in a warehouse doing a larger renovation, more often than not, they're probably going to be using a lot of chemicals, and the last thing you want is somebody to go in there with a disc cutter, which could potentially set a fire. Okay, you want to look after your guys. Location of existing services. Again, this should be with the architect. Ground conditions, underground structures and watercourses. All information you can get from the architect as well. This should all be done and dusted before you come on site. Don't get me wrong, I understand that sometimes you just get planning application plans and you've got to do the rest of the work for yourself, but just know that, well, we are thinking about it. Don't worry. Any existing structures that have to be removed, previous structural modifications, fire damage, ground shrinkage, movement or poor maintenance, especially if you're dealing with insurance work, difficulties relating to plant and equipment in the premises, health and safety information contained in earlier design, construction or as-built drawings, asbestos, including survey results, contaminated land, including survey results, existing structures containing hazardous materials, health risks arising from clients' activities, do they do pottery or something like that, okay, and relevant information from an existing health and safety file. So this is, so I jumped up there. So this is relevant to your health and safety file at the end. If you're going to be, say, team 2 of 5 going on site, you need to have been given a health and safety file because you need to know exactly what they've done with regards to their health and safety and what dangers you might be coming up against. Similarly, you want to give the same information to the guy behind you as well. You want to look after one another at the end of the day. All right. By the way, if you don't have to deal with any of this, a simple NA is absolutely fine. Okay. Lastly, significant design and construction hazards. You've got COVID-19 during an outbreak, steps will be taken to review, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Arrangements for coordination of ongoing design work and handling design changes. Significant risks identified during design and materials requiring particular precautions. Hopefully you get that information from your architect. If you do, they're a good architect. If you don't, well, you know some of the guys you get when you see the plans. All right. And that's your pre-construction information. It is heavily detailed. And as you can see, it's probably something that you would think, yeah, I'd probably be using that a lot more on a commercial site. Okay. From there, you can then hop over to the construction phase plan, something a little bit more relevant to the domestic construction industry. Okay. So firstly, you've got the project description, key dates, existing structures, ground conditions, existing traffic systems, and working restrictions, including any additional COVID measures. Essentially, paragraph for paragraph of the pre-construction info. Okay. From there, we've then got the management structure. So had I saved anything about my health and safety policy, that would have been updated here. Okay. We've then got the management of the works, the health and safety goals. And again, we've written this information for you so you don't have to throw out all the jargon. Okay. So the work that should be carried out at all times in accordance with the company health and safety policy, and amongst others, the following legislation. I'm not going to say all this because I think you'd fall asleep by the time I get halfway through it. All right, but you can see that we're actually covering you for every bit of legislation for the construction industry. Okay. From there, you've then got monitoring and reviewing. So the site manager, supervisor, and site foreman, as part of their line management responsibilities, will inspect the site on a daily basis using the form, site inspection, or the site audit. That really depends on whether or not you're doing that daily, weekly, or so on. Okay, site audit, that is a killer sheet. Don't get me wrong, it will take you a while to go through it. All right, so I would say do that bi-weekly. Okay, but the site checklist and the site inspection is more just to make sure that everything's cleaned away so you guys don't hurt themselves. We've heard horror stories throughout the years of us selling health and safety software, such as steps going into a cabin haven't been cleaned, somebody slipping on mud, doing their back in, and they're right to be able to claim on that because that's not their fault. That somebody should have been dealing with that was in charge of the health and safety. So you don't want these things to happen. You just want to clear away the wires and all sorts, really. All right. Liaisons between parties on site. How are people going to be communicating with one another? Okay. Consultation with the workforce. How are you going to be dealing with this? Are you going to be speaking to them every day? Is it just going to be once or twice a week? The exchange of design information. Who's going to be in charge of that as well? Because as you know, you'll get on site, and even though the architect's thrown together a wonderful image, okay, the likelihood of you being able to deal with that on site sometimes is going to be, well, it's not going to happen really. So you can just think, right, okay, then this has to be changed. It's usually the principal designer that would be dealing with that. Okay, so they can speak to the architect then and go, right, okay, by the way, this can't happen. What can we do to then change it and make a modification? Okay, handling design changes during the project as well. So under the current CDM requirements, it is required that any design change which ultimately has the potential to impact on the health and safety of those completing works or end users of the completed scheme should be communicated and managed through the principal designer. So, as I've said. Okay, selection of and control of contractors. And as you can see, this part here, we've done a lot of the writing for you to save you a hell of a lot of time. Just go through this the first time you want to read it, and then you can go, right, okay, then I can add on X and Y for this specific job. Now, what you can do, which is quite nice, if you know that you work on purely schools and hospitals, okay, what you can do is when you're going through this aspect of the job, you've got these folders on the right-hand side, okay? And what you can do is if I click that, we can see that we've got the HP Excel standard paragraph default, and it's saying the essential that design information, blah, 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 blah. But what you can then do is you can add on the information about schools, and then you can add on the information about hospitals. Okay, so that way then when you get back to this, you don't have to worry about writing it all the time because your paragraph will be typed out, and then you can save it as hospital paragraph or so on and so forth. Okay, and that way then you can just pick it out from a list and you don't have to worry about it. Just making your time a little bit quicker anyway. Okay, we've then got the exchange of health and safety information between contractors, site security, what that's going to be, site induction. All personnel arriving on site will be required to attend a site induction session before starting work. And again, it's telling Form X, okay, that you will find on under the management documentation up here. Okay, on-site training, how we're going to deal with that. Welfare facilities, what's going to be provided. The production and approval of risk assessments and written systems of work. Okay. The reporting and investigation of accidents and incidents, including near misses. How are we going to document that? But again, we've got that information there. First aid. On-site first aid arrangements will be commensurate with the operations being carried out. That's a wonderful sentence. Don't want to say that one again. Thank you. And then you've got your site rules as well, something that you can write up. All right. We've got these for you as a standard, but then just elaborate, really. And then the fire and emergency procedures. Again, we've got a form for that in the management documentation. We're going to be looking at a load of forms in a moment. Okay. From there, you've then got the client names and details. So it's already picked up the client. If we had selected a principal designer and principal contractor, they would be populated. Then we can add on additional designers and additional contractors if necessary going forward. Okay. Local authority. What I can do is I can drop that down. We've got the Bristol City Council here. And what we've done is, again, clicking that icon, you're going to be able to find every local authority in there. Okay, so just think somebody in our admin team had to find all this information and write it in there. So, time well spent. And then what we can do is we can then start dropping in our environmental agency as well. And brilliant, what we can do is we can click that little man there and we can find whoever covers us as well, dependent on where we are in the country. All right. From there, gas, electricity, water, telecommunications, cable and wireless, traffic control, depending on who you're dealing with. Okay, so if you are shutting off roads, who you're dealing with when it comes to traffic control. But gas, electricity, and water, that's more in case you are actually going into the ground near mains or a major pipe work. Okay, because what should happen is if you've gone through one of them accidentally, contact the company that's their supplier, and that way then you can make sure that it's all being documented by their team of engineers. All right, so you want to make sure that you're not liable for that information. And then fire, hospital, and police for the relevant things. If anything catches fire, where the nearest fire station is, Hospital, if somebody gets hurt, where can we take them quickly? And then the police, if something gets stolen or anything goes wrong on site, where's the nearest station? Okay. From there, delivery and removal of materials and equipment, dealing with services, adjacent land usage. As you can see, this box is empty because the software can't see where you're working next to. Stability of structures whilst carrying out construction work, including temporary structures and existing unstable structures. Okay, so your acros, your scaffolding, and so on. Preventing falls, working with near fragile materials, control of lifting operations, maintenance of plant and equipment, working on excavations of poor ground conditions. And the thing is, as you can see, it just goes on and on all the way through this as well. I don't want to, make you fall asleep, but you can see we are covering it as well for you. Okay. But as you can see here, the two empty boxes that do come after these are any significant health risks and any significant safety risks that the software cannot pick up. Okay. And you can see that we've got a dedicated box to COVID-19 as well that we will always update if there are any changes necessary. Okay. Now, before I go into essentially what is going to be all the documentation now, does anybody have any questions about the pre-construction information and the construction phase plan? If you want to know what the construction phase plan looks like, by the way, I'll just click preview and you can see how it's going to be written out. Okay, so you'll have your introduction there, and then you can see that it's going to stay at the top. Use this document together with the risk assessments, COVID-19 mitigation, Toolbox Talks, and the spread of COVID-19. So we'll have our client, site address, principal designer, principal contractor, table of contents, and then information about the job, who's in charge, their duties, going on and on. Okay, and there is a small construction phase plan as well. Okay, just in case you are doing smaller works. All right, fitting windows, something like that. Okay. So I'll just see if anybody does want to ask any questions before going on to the next part. No questions. Okay, so from here, we're then going to have the risk assessments, the cost sheets, the method statements, and then we can go on to the documentation as well. So firstly, risk assessments. Now, we've got risk assessments all from all operations, core assessment, through to your excavations, bulldozers, terribly sorry, bulldozers, and so on. Okay, so if I go for, say, excavations to begin with, what you'll be able to see on the right-hand side here is if I make that just a wee bit bigger. Okay, we can see here that your company logo is going to be at the top. You'll then have the information about the assessor, and then you've got the risk assessment information. Okay, so the activity is going to be the excavation itself, what the hazard is, excavation, risks, collapse of unsupported excavations, falling into the unfenced excavations, materials or plant falling, so on and so forth. We then have pre-control risk ratings, so we've got 1 and 2, and what we would do is we times both together to get this wonderful number here, okay, 36. These numbers aren't just made up, okay, well, this is guidance. So we've got exposure ratings, which is 1, and severity ratings, which is 2. So highly unlikely to regular, so somebody can continually fall into that trench, all right? And then you've got trivial or fatality, multiple fatality, and what can happen is that if any plant falls on that person when they're in the trench, that can happen as well. So what are we going to do? We've got the ladder access to be supported part of the excavation, plan provision and use of the excavation supported equipment by competent persons, warning signs, adequate fencing for covering of excavations and so on, materials be stockpiled and suitable distance clear of the edge of the excavation. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, a trench, even though it's a meter deep, okay, the likelihood is you'll probably just hop in and out of that, okay? However, if you've got these control measures in place, then you'll make sure that nothing does happen, okay? Now, I don't think the health and safety guys are going to be walking around going, oh, look at that trench. It's not got a ladder in it. How bad's that going to happen? It's more on the lines of if you're going with much deeper foundations, if you're going past the meter depth, 1.2, 1.5 meters, that's when you're going to have to start thinking about, okay, we need ladders. We need to guard this off because these guys are down there. If anything collapses in, we want to make sure that this is all looked after. Okay, because things on the news, guys going into deep trenches, if it collapses, they can't get out, and unfortunately they don't make it. So we want to make sure that you are looked after if you're not going super deep. Plus, if you're hitting bedrock at 400 mil, you're not going to have a ladder going into that, are you? That's just a big step. All right. But following those control measures, we then have a post-control risk rating of 1, which is excellent. Okay, you can't get better than 1. But then what we've done for you as well is we've associated relevant risks as well, such as falls, ladders, and confined spaces of work. Okay, so we're just giving you a link to click on the next one. All right. What you can see down here is that although we've got a number 1, we can come down here and then we've got a number of 12 and we're still in the green because, don't get me wrong, the risk is cutting into underground electricity cables and contact with overhead power lines. Now, these are things that you're never going to be able to get away from. Don't get me wrong, especially if you're digging down, and you know it as well as everybody else in the building industry, even though it says one power line is going to be going under a house at one point, you'll go over there with your wire detecting service, and then you'll find that it's in a completely different spot. Okay, so you want to make sure that, okay, then this is where we want to be working. All right, but with that danger, you can still make that safe. I think if it gets past 14, that's when it starts turning yellow and red. Okay, so you can make sure that you are still looked after. Okay, if you can't find the relevant risk assessment, don't worry. Okay, because all you've got to do is just click add at the top, and then you'll be able to find the other risks that we have in there. As you can see, we've even got bomb threats in there as well. Okay, that's not to say that somebody's pinpointing you with a pipe bomb. Hopefully you're not got kind of a reputation anyway that somebody doesn't like you too much. But this is more on the lines of digging down and finding something from World War II that's been left in the ground, okay, which can happen. So we want to make sure that that's covered as well, okay, and nuclear work and so on. So that's your risk assessments. Flipping over and going with the cost assessment. This is more just going to be written information that you'll be able to go through. Okay, so if we have a look at, say, Portland Cement, which is a standard one, really, again, your logo will be at the top. Then it just goes through the information on Portland Cement. So we've got the name, known as, what its uses, suppliers, so blue circle, obviously. Application, hand and machine, yes. Indoor, outdoor, yes. Brush and spray, no, absolutely not. People at risk, site operatives. Controlled ingredients. If you're needing to add anything in there, what you can do is you can add that in, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. Hazards, so what the frequency of use will be, the health risks, PPE, what you should be wearing, hazard classification, assessment of risks, fire, and so on, how to store it, so spillage, first aid, if it gets on your skin, what to do, more often than not, it's just wash your hands, okay, if it gets in your eyes, clean with water, inhalation, if you breathe it in, what to do. If somebody eats it on site, I just think you should let natural selection take its course, really, I'll be totally honest. But don't let anybody swallow water. You don't want that because of the lime inside, it can cut you up inside. So you don't want to do that. And lastly, you've got your risk and safety phrases as well. Now, this is something that's come over from the USA. All right. Now, if the material has a risk and safety phrase, we'll write it in. All right. You don't have to worry about this too much. If this is blank, ignore it at the end of the day. Okay. And then you can have it signed and dated at the bottom. To add in anything, all you've got to do is just go up to the top where it says edit. And then you can just go to hazardous substances, add that, and find what the architect wants you to add in there as well. So if it's, I'm not even going to try and pronounce this word, but if it was that one there, we can click OK. And then it's got its cast number and all the information relevant to what we're going to be doing as well. And if I click add, oh, nope, sorry, click OK. That's now shimmied. And if I go in there, we now have it in there as well. Okay, so we've got that. And similarly, by the way, if you go back to the risk assessments, if you click edit, you can add in your own lines of information and you can give them your own pre-control risk rating. All right. So I've just had a question. Can you add the health and safety software to the existing subscription and pay monthly? Absolutely. All right. So that wouldn't be a problem at all. So we've then got we've done your cost assessments, method statements. Okay. As you'll know with method statements, these change from job to job depending on what you're working on. However, what you can do is you can build up a catalog of method statements for your business. Okay, so if I go and add one in, we've got some templates for you. So industrial unit roofing, brick paving, confined space, demolition of brick built structure with asbestos cement sheet roof. Okay, so if I click this one here and go OK, it's going to load up there. And you can see the template that we've got for you to be able to just write through and just go down step by step. Okay, so there's about 24 points you have to cover. I know that sounds overkill, but it does cover you for your method statements. Okay, and then what you can do is you can name it X, and then when you get a similar job, click it, change the information what's relevant, print it off, and then it just starts getting you faster and faster, which is quite nice. Okay, so this one is going to be the information about the job itself and who's the signature of approver. We've then got the introduction to the job. So this method statement describes the specific safe working methods which will be used to carry out the work. It gives details of how work will be carried out and what health and safety issues and controls are involved. The content of this method statement reflects the finding of the relevant risk assessments. So a generic introduction there. You've then got description of the work, the purpose, the demolition of a 1950 single-story brick built outbuilding. Okay, scope of the work, how you're going to do it, sequence of operations, the duration. The demolition stage should take about 2 weeks because it's got the asbestos in it. You want to make sure that it's all gone. Completion criteria. Site location. That's already going to be pulled in from your project details. Surrounding area. The pre-works preparation. Access arrangements. Licensing. Permit to work systems. Supervisors. I'm going to go through this a little bit quicker now. Okay. Responsibilities for the safety control and monitoring. Duties of the guys on site, personnel, who's going to be there, the client details, principal contractor, principal designer, that's information that will be pre-selected, demolition contractor, if applicable. Okay, storage of materials, what you're going to do, plant and equipment, what you're going to use, inspections, who's going to be inspecting, what you're going to be inspecting as well, operator training, do they have a proof certificate, hazards identified, moving plant, noise, dust, vibration, and so on, risk assessments, what ones are you going to be using, live services, plans to be drawn up, person responsible, the principal contractor via the site manager, or if that's the same person, just write in whoever it is. Cost assessments, noise assessments, risk to third parties, waste handling, dust and smoke, water, the site manager, fuel oils, risks of environmental contamination. So where's the water going to be running away? Is it going to be going into a local stream? Hopefully not. First aid equipment, PPE, what to wear, emergencies and incidents, so additional procedures, changes to standard procedures, welfare facilities, methodology, briefing arrangements, person responsible, acknowledgement by signing the foot, drawings and sketches, other information that we're not aware of, and then we've got that signed off as well. Okay, so once you've built that up for several jobs, you could be removing a garage, depending on what you want to do, you've got that in there as well. Okay, from there, you've then got the Toolbox Talk and the management documentation. Before I go into those items there, we're almost finished by the way, guys. Does anybody have any questions about the risk assessments, the cost assessments, and the method statements? Terribly sorry, I did have a lisp when I was younger, so it probably sounds like a snake's doing half of this talking, so I do apologize there. Okay, still no questions, all right. So the last few things, we've got our Toolbox Talks, management documentation, health and safety file, and the views. Okay, so firstly, Toolbox Talks. If I click that there, what you're going to be able to see down the left-hand side here are things that you can go through with your guys on site. Now, what you can do is you can print a lot of these off, have them in a booklet, and just have you guys read them and say whether or not they're happy with the information that you're providing. Okay, and then you can sign them off on this information instead of going through all these individual items all the time. Okay, get these guys to just give them a little bit of reading information. But what you can see is that you've got your health and safety benefits, your accident prevention control, competence, young persons on site, first aid, personal protective equipment, alcohol, excavations, asbestos, personal hygiene, abrasive wheels, chainsaws, hoists, mobile, Wells disease, waste management, pollution, confined spaces. What we're doing is recovering as much as we can. Okay? And then being a considerate neighbor, low-level access equipment, gas-powered tools, environmental nuisance, tool hygiene, and reducing spread of COVID-19. So if you want to go through this, you can see what the purpose would be, why we're doing that, and its preparation. Okay, and from there, we'd be able to go through the COVID-19, the before and after use of your tools, tool management, isolating tools and equipment, how to clean and disinfect tools and equipment, if you or someone else gets it wrong, what to do, and then what whatever questions they may have. Now, if you give us a call, we can go through some of these answers with you if you wanted to. It's absolutely fine, but more often than not, it's more going to be along the lines of just go in, have this information. You probably have this information anyway. Okay, so where would you find information on the health hazards of COVID-19? What should you do if you run out of cleaning products or PPE? What are we going to do? Okay, so you do have this as well. All right. We do have mental health awareness in here also, so to just make sure that you guys are being looked after as well when it comes to their mental health. All right. From here, we've then got our management documentation. So this is the information that you will need to have on site. Okay, so everything else you can, with your risk assessments, your cost sheets, your method statements, all right? As long as there's a digital format, well, okay, let me just clarify this a second. If you speak to your local health and safety office, okay, ask them what you can use in a digital format, all right? That way then, what you can do is you can have everybody signed off on the risk assessments, but you don't have to print every risk assessment off, because what we have here is acknowledgement of risk assessments. Have this in paper, have everybody's signature, brilliant. But don't worry about printing off 100 risk assessments for a job, okay? We're trying to be as green as we can, okay? As a company, we've written all this information out. You can export this as well into documentation that somebody can read in a large PDF format, so they can just go through all the risks. If they're happy with them, get them to sign off on it, okay? So that's what you want more than anything else. Okay, just speak to your local HSE, see whether or not they're happy with you doing that. If they're not, unfortunately, you're going to have to print. If they are, great. Okay, you can have it. But then you've got your site induction register. Just go through this information. And the thing is that you can edit all this information. Okay, if you want to add on different bits of information that you go through with your guys on site, site details, welfare facilities, major risks and specific activities, accidents, attendance register, and so on. What do you want to do as your business? Just add it in there or use ours and go with it. Okay, you've then got work permit registers, noise assessments, all your work permit systems here. Okay, asbestos, confined space, electrical, and so on. Make sure they've all got their permits. Scaffolding inspection, plant inspection, harness inspection, site rules, scaffolding handover certificates, fire plans. Okay, site audits, excavation pre-work checklists, health and safety information, breach of health and safety procedures, simple construction health and safety plan. So this is your simple construction phase plan. Okay. You've then got your name, your client, architect, principal designer. What is the job? Is there anything that the client has made you aware of? And then you can go through these details as well. So inspection of building and dusts, activities or works requiring supervision, if there are any, and you can fill that information in. Okay, operatives and employees training record. Again, you can make sure that you can write in their courses, the dates, and the training organization carrying out the training as well. All right. Once you're happy with all of this documentation, you've then got your health and safety files. So at the end of the job, you can write this up and hand it over to a client. Now, it's more used in the commercial sector, but domestic sectors can use it as well. Okay, so description of the work carried out, hazards that have not been eliminated, key structural principles, hazardous materials used, and this is just information for the next guy going on to make sure that he's not picking anything up. Okay, and that's your health and safety. That's everything you would get with health and safety plus. Okay, health and safety premium takes us one step further. All right, so we then have the views here, and this is what health and safety premium gives you. Okay, so not only are we going to give you all the information, but we can go to the health and safety table, HSG 65, and we can see, okay, under the plan, do, check, act, approach. These are the relevant bits of information that you would need. But then what we've also got under here is the construction stage view. Is that, okay, day 0, what you would need to be filling out. Pre-construction, what you would need to be filling out. Construction phase, review. Okay, so this is everything that you would need during that time, so you can see a breakdown of it as well. Okay, and then you can see a Gantt view as well. So you'll be able to see, okay, then what risks are going to be relevant with building regulations. Okay, but then we've also got drainage, and that expands as well. So we can be looking at buried services, electricity, underground cables, bulldozers, and so on, depending on what we're going to be using. Okay, and that is our health and safety software. Does anybody have any questions? How do you put in the logo again? So what we can do here, back at the project details, okay, we've got your health and safety expert here. All you've got to do is just click clear. So you clear the current logo, and then you can click browse, and you can add in whatever you want, really. It really depends on what you want to do. Okay, so clearing it is just nice and simple. Browsing, I can do that, and then I can click say a logo, and that brings back whichever logo that's going to be. Okay, so I can do that as well. All right. How do you export and email it to contractors? So what will happen here is once you've got that information, you can just click export at the top, and you've got to PDF, but you can drop that down and it can go into a Word document, open document, rich text format, plain text, and so on. Okay, so you can just click whichever ones you want to get export. You can export them and send them via email to your contractors as well. All right. Any other questions? Right. Okay. Well, one of the questions we do get asked is how much is the software? So what we can do, okay, is if I just take you to the HP Excel shop, you'll be able to see the health and safety software here. So we've got two ways of purchase. We've got the annual subscription, which for the Plus, it's going to be £499 a year. And for the Premium, it'll be £599 a year. Or what you have is, terribly sorry, the outright purchase, which is £1,299 for the lifetime. Or for the Premium, it's £1,499. Okay. So pros and cons of both. As you can see, pro of the annual subscription, it's a cheaper upfront cost. Okay, and what you would be doing is you'd be paying this sum every year. Okay, when it comes to the premium and the lifetime license, sorry, what we'll be able to do for you there is you have the software for the first 12 months. After 12 months, we give you a call and say, would you like your support and updates to continue? If you were to say yes, then what we would then do is we'd then charge you £18 a month ongoing. Okay, now the thing is, the reason why the lifetime license does then start working out a little bit nicer, okay, is because after year 3, this would then be more expensive. Okay, year 4, 5, 6, 7, depending on how long you're going to be using our software, it will be the more expensive option going forward. Okay, so there are pros and cons of both. If you have a much older version of the software and you'd like to upgrade it to the latest version, okay, so you can do it one of two ways. If you're running if you're going for a subscription, okay, believe it or not, it's going to be £299. Okay. If you're going for the lifetime license, it'd be £698. So if you already own the software and it's out of date and you're coming back round, it's much cheaper. That's because you've spent £1,000, £700, £800 4 or 5, 6 years ago. Okay. Okay, any further questions, please get in contact. We'll be more than happy to help. Okay, but thank you ever so much for your time this evening, and I wish you all the very best, and please stay safe. Thank you.